This is it. Oh, I don't like that jiggle there. And action. Welcome back to Show and Tell. I'm Billie. This is it. Finally finished the Norwegian wood, and not just the sweater, which I'll stand up in a minute to show you, but the hat and the pom-pom. Thank you, Diane, for lending me the pom-pom maker. The pom-pom makers I have, I knew were going to be too small, and I wanted a substantial pom-pom. Cashmere pom-pom, everyone. Hello. I had a lot of yarn left over, which I sort of expected that I would, because if you go back a number of episodes, you'll see that I ordered enough to make the sweater, but really thin, and it was too thin, so I ordered double amounts so I could hold it double. And then I ended up having quite a bit, enough to make a hat, and work in progress, mittens with my monogram. Nothing like jumping right into the episode. I didn't give you any like warm up, like I'm in Manhattan and I don't know what the temperature is today, but winter is here. It's starting to be chilly. If you've been with me for a while, you'll know that this was supposed to be my Rhinebeck sweater, and I thought I would have it finished in time, but I simply did not. I purchased these beautiful buttons at Rhinebeck from Dusty's Vintage Buttons, and I had a million ends all up the sleeve and down the side, because every 6 rows, when I did a row of solid white, I cut the blue and started it at the end where the white left off. So there are other ways of doing it. I wasn't as clever as some of you, but that's what I ended up with. So I spent 2 full days doing nothing but weaving in ends, weaving in ends, weaving in ends. But now they're all woven in, so I could finally show it to you. This pattern is a traditional Norwegian pattern, which I saw in a photograph, but there were no instructions for the sweater. So I drafted a sweater to my own liking. It's pretty much straight up and down. A little bit of waist shaping I gave it, and I did a modified drop shoulder. So the sleeve comes all the way to here, and it eliminates a lot of extra fabric that I would have had if I had continued this all the way up. I would have that much extra fabric in here where I really don't want it or need it. So just in case you were wondering, yes, the whole back is patterned, of course. Stripes for the cuffs. So it's stranded knitting. I carried floats behind everything. I didn't catch the floats because the pattern repeat wasn't that long, and this yarn's very fine. I think in the parts that are stranded, I think I was getting 38 stitches to 4 inches. So even if I had 9 stitches, it wasn't a whole lot of float in there. And you can see I used the same motif here, but the picture I had seen, which I'll put here, had this little zigzag, and I thought that looked nice. I had asked some of you if I should do a blue pom-pom or a white pom-pom, and I got mixed answers. I went with the blue because the original picture, which was green, did a green pom-pom, and I thought if I have white yarn left over, I'll be able to use that in something somewhere. But this blue, I don't think I would have so much call for, so I really wanted to use up the blue. Oh, I was about to tell you about the pom-pom maker. If you're not familiar with these, and I will have a link in the show notes of where you can purchase these. They're made by Clover, and there are a lot of moving parts. There are 2 things here and 2 things here, and this comes apart. But to begin with, you take your yarn and you wind it all around this semicircle until it's really full. And then you go on the other side and you wind the yarn around that until that's really full. And then you close this, and if it's sufficient amount of yarn, you should have a hard time squeezing it in here. Like yarn is filling up all that space. And same thing on the other side. When you close this, you want there to be quite a bit of yarn. And then you cut in between these 2 discs, cut all around, tie it off, and then you pull this open and voila, you have a pom-pom. And then if it's uneven, you can trim it. Well, let me tell you, this is like if you ever felt a beautiful pile rug that's made of like wool or silk. It's smooth like a rug and very, very dense. I hope you can see that. The strings that I tied the center off with, I just put through the top of the hat and I tied it inside to the end of the yarn after I did my bind off at the top. This hat, I don't want to take it off because my hair will be a mess, but this hat started here with a folded hem. So I did ribbing here and then ribbing on the outside. I picked up the stitches and continued to knit this way. I did a purl row to make a nice fold there, and then continued up the inside until I got to the top of the crown. And pretty straightforward. The pom-pom is the big feature, and I hope you can see it. Okay, back to the mittens. The mittens are out of this book, Nordic Knits by Johanna Wallen. I'm waiting in the hospital while my husband is having some tests done as part of a research study that he is participating in. But while waiting for him, I know it's going to be quite a few hours. Of course, I brought my knitting with me. And I'm almost up to the point where I'm going to knit in my initials. So I wanted to show you the progress that I've made. This is, of course, going to match my Norwegian wood sweater and hat. I'm just at the section now where I'm about to do the thumb gusset. Stay tuned for that. This is a little snippet of what that thumb gusset pattern looks like. The book that I'm working from is called Traditional Nordic Knits by Johanna Wallen. She has a pattern called Monogram Mittens, and it's all charted, beautifully charted. And she also gives all the initials and numbers. I don't want to hold it on the screen too long. Get the book maybe from your library or purchase it. I'll try and put a link to where you can buy it online. So I created my own monogram. I thought of doing this motif on the glove, but I thought, it's maybe like a little too much. And this pattern seemed perfectly good. I thought it would change things up a little. So I'm only partway up the first mitten. I will do the year on the other mitten. If I finish it this year, it'll say 2024. If it goes into January, I'll have to put 2025. This is the thumb gusset. It has more like a checkerboard pattern on it. And a perfect fit. I mean, I had the gauge exactly of what she calls for in the book. So initially I thought it was maybe going to be too big, because actually when it's off, it looks really wide. Like compared to my hand, I just thought it seemed like wide. But maybe because of the stranding, it fills in some of the space. But I started with initially when I thought it was going to be too big, I started with fewer stitches cast on, and I was like revamping the motif a little bit to get it to work with fewer stitches. And I ran into a little bit of a mess when I got to the thumb gusset. So I said, you know what, let me measure my stitch count. Maybe I am getting the gauge that she's getting. And sure enough, I had the 38 stitches. So I went back and redid it. I hadn't gone all that far, so it wasn't a big deal. It works up pretty quickly. This is just a couple days of knitting. I am on a size 1 needle, and the yarn, if you haven't been here with me before, is 100% cashmere, 3/28 NM from Color Mart. So it's very, very fine. I would say finer than lace weight. And I'm holding each color double. For the sweater, I was working off not just the cones, but I also created bobbins because I had multiple things going at once. But with this, I decided to do one mitten at a time, so I didn't have one mitten with cones, the other mitten with bobbins. I didn't want to have like cones hanging from one mitten and bobbins hanging from the other and getting things all twisted up. I thought, oh, I'll just do one at a time. And I'm glad I did, because I found, you know, that I had to rip back. I would have had to rip back too. So this is coming along. Happy to report. I got a comment in my last video from Debbie Williams, who told me after I had bragged that I had no errors in the motif, that it was so easy for me to see. I shouldn't have bragged so quickly, because Hawkeye Debbie found one little white stitch that was out of place. So if you go back to the last episode and you go to 13 minutes, 35 seconds in, you'll see the error that she caught. Probably at the time, it was early on the sweater, I could see that the pattern was kind of busy. I probably just thought, oh, I can duplicate stitch over it. But I'm not even going to bother, because when I'm moving and out and about, you're not going to be with a magnifying glass. I had zoomed in specifically on that place, silly me. But normally, I don't think anybody would see it. Yes, there are a couple of other little spots. I'm not going to point them out to you because I can't even find them. This sweater was such a joy to knit, because it just kept me going forward. I guess you could say there was like some monotony to it, because you're doing the same thing over and over again, but the monotony was of something interesting, and you had to pay attention to stepping in one stitch and then getting to that white row and then stepping out one stitch and all of that. So there was a lot of stuff to keep me focused and interested, and it was just a pleasure. Yes, it took months. If you look on my Ravelry page, and I'll put a link in the show notes, you'll see that I started it, I think, about 5 months ago. But I was working on other things in between. So that's why it took so long. But this is like a once-in-a-lifetime thing. I won't be doing this again. I do want to point out, you know, that I'm a vintage jewelry lover. My husband's Aunt Bobby gave me this set necklace. There's a matching bracelet, which I have hooked up in the back to extend the length of the necklace, because the necklace would be up here, you wouldn't even see it. And these earrings, they're check glass, and it's like a molded glass. I'll do a close-up. I'll do a flat lay of the sweater with some jewelry, because I have other vintage jewelry that I can pair with this. Blue is a really good color for me, so any wonder I would have blue jewelry in my jewelry box. At this point, I want to just pause for a moment and remind you that come January, I will be launching another knit along, and I'll put a picture here. The link for how you sign up will be in the show notes. This is the yarn that I'm planning to use for that project. And it's ironic that I pulled out something that's been languishing for quite a long time. For the rink or the links, that also has red yarn in it. I ripped out a good part of it. Well, I ripped out the whole entire sweater, but I ripped it out in sections, in parts, as I reknit that part, so that I would never at any time have just a bunch of spaghetti and nothing to show for it, no knitted fabric to show for it. So there's red in that. There's going to be red in the knitted for skiing, the knit along. And in my acquisitions section, you'll see I bought yet more red yarn. So there'll be a lot of red coming out of this corner of the world. So here's my current progress for the rink or the links. This is the back. It's complete. There's a cable, not a cable, there's stitch holder cord in the bottom because I did a provisional cast on in case I want to come back and extend the ribbing, which I might, depending on where this hits me when I put it on. So the back's been done for a while, but I recently resumed knitting on the front. And they're basted together. That's why I have everything hanging here. Because I like to try it on periodically. Okay, there's a lot of bobbins, and let me get all the bobbins out of the way if I can. Don't attempt this at home. That's all I can tell you. This is a lot of work. And the reason why I ripped out an entire sweater was I had initially done this whole sweater almost to completion using stranded knitting, 3 colors. Most rows only have 2 colors, so I thought, well, that's satisfactory for a Fair Isle. But the fabric turned out to be oh so stiff. Actually, I left a little bit of the original fabric on here so I could show you this part. And I don't know if you can see the thickness, but it's thick and it's very, very dense compared to this. This is intarsia. As I'm redoing it, I'm doing it completely in intarsia, which is why I have, don't laugh at me, be kind, a million ends. I'm going to be weaving in ends forever. I would do it as I went along, but the risk of doing that is if I need to rip this out yet again, I would never be able to do that if everything was all woven in. So I've completely shied away from weaving in. I'll just have to live with this for now until the sweater is complete. Then I'll go back and weave everything in. So I am partway up the front. I'm not to the underarm yet, but these vintage sweaters, this is from the 1930s, they tend to be short, and I'm short. So because I have it basted together, you'll be able to see this is the side seam. Here's where I bound off for the underarm, and let me see if I can get this better. So I have about that much more to go. this part from here to here. Can you see this? I mean, it's hard for me to show you. Maybe sideways, it's easier. It's unwieldy. So I'm up to here. I have that much more before I get to the underarm. And then it gets narrow, very narrow, because I'm narrow in the shoulders. From that point, it'll be pretty quick. The problem with things like this, there's no chart, first of all. It's written, you know, knit 1 of this color, knit 3 of the next color, knit 2 of the third color, and so on. It's a little complicated to read, but now I'm very familiar with the pattern. Similar to this, you keep going, you know, 1 stitch over, like in this little stair step, 1 stitch over to get it to decrease like that. And now that I have all this knit and it repeats, I can just refer back to this as my chart, almost. I love it. I mean, I think it's just going to be exquisite, which is why I'm bothering to do this again and again. So stay with me on this. This has been going on for over 2 years, but resting a good part of that time. So I did rip out part of the first version and washed this, hung it up. I put little stitch markers to hang each clump on a wire hanger, hung it in my shower, and let the weight of the water weigh it down. But it's still got quite a lot of kink in it. It's not how it originally was. The yarn is the original Knit by Numbers by John Arbon in the UK. They have reformulated this yarn. It's not the same as it was when I bought it. So hopefully I have enough. I think I do. I bought an extra amount of the brown because the sleeves have a lot of ribbing. I think over 6 inches of ribbing. That's going to be all brown, just like the waist. So as soon as I'm done the mittens, I will be on this, hopefully full time. I say hopefully because I made some yarn acquisitions since I was last with you. I know I always brag to you that I don't do stash. I fell off the wagon. I didn't do a lot of damage, but you know, it was my birthday, the end of October, and the Big Apple Knitters Guild, of which I'm a member, had their annual sale and auction. And I thought, well, I've never been, because I've only been a member of the guild for just about a year now. And I thought, well, that would be interesting to see, a yarn auction. So I went, and they gave us each paper plates as our paddles. I did a little video there. I'll insert it here so you can see. I don't know if the sound came out because I was in the back of the room and the auctioneer was way up front. Anyway, there were a few people who posed as auctioneers.
$50, $50, $55, $55, $55 going once, going twice, sold for $55 to the woman who almost bought the piano, number 9.
I forget how many lots they had, maybe like 50 different lots, and they were on display before the auction began, so you could go and you could feel them and look at the color and look at the labeling to see the fiber and the gauge and so forth. I only put up a bid for one thing, and when it got to be over $50, I bowed out of the bidding. But after the auction ended, then they had a sale of yarns that people have donated, and this is a big fundraiser for them. The prices were irresistible. So this yarn is Cascade Heritage. It's superwash merino, but they also make Cascade Heritage silk, unbeknownst to me. Well, I happened to see on the sale table a bag of red yarn, and I thought, gee, that's a pretty shade of red. And when I looked into it further, the person had, well, here's the ball band. It says Cascade Heritage Silk. And I looked at the colorway. I forget where it is now, but it's written on here somewhere. Maybe the number 5619. Yeah, I don't think they have. I don't. Everybody had to make a label with what they were donating, but this label didn't have the color written on it. It just says it came from a smoke-free and pet-free home. The retail value was $64, although I believe today it might be more. The total yardage was 1748 yards, and they say 7 to 8 stitches per inch, 85% wool, 15% silk. Brought it home, checked that color number, and it turns out this also is Christmas red, just like that. I really haven't held them up next to one another to see. I don't know, this is all tied together in here, but I think it's the same. I mean, I wouldn't use it in the same sweater, but maybe a shawl to go with that sweater. I think I have something else completely different in mind for it, but that is another story for another day. So I have 3 other acquisitions. This one, I'm not taking them out of the bags because they're still in quarantine. I've had them in my freezer for, I think it's 2 weeks now. A week? 2 weeks, whatever. I'm going to keep them in my freezer a while longer because I don't really know where they've been. This is Juniper Moon Farm Pollock. It's a discontinued yarn. 55% silk, 45% linen, sport weight. There's 4 balls of it. And this was originally $106 worth of yarn. All the prices I paid were 30 and under. So the color is called, I think it's called like ocean gray, something like that. It reads a little more beige, but I think if I put this with charcoal, it might work for my complexion. So that's a summer project, perhaps for next summer. This yarn, I couldn't resist the colors. I don't know how this is going to look when knit up. I'll have to do a swatch to see. I might want to mix this with something else to dilute it if it's too, like if it pools too much. The colors, it's really hard to describe. It's sort of like a pink, mauve, I don't know, beigey, very, very pretty, very unusual. And it's knit picks. It's not, you know, it wasn't an expensive yarn. But it's baby alpaca, 70%, 30% silk. It's called Shimmer. They don't make this colorway anymore, although they do still make Shimmer. And it's 1,760 yards total. Lace weight. So I might hold it double with something else. I don't know. And then lastly, I'll pull this one out of the bag. This, another lace weight, wool and silk. The brand is Zephyr, and it's called Jagger Spun. We think it's 1,890 yards. I bought this because of the color. I think the color is just so beautiful. I've done other things in this sort of lavender hue. I didn't compare it to my shawl that I made, which is that herringbone thing that I used Pearl Soho linen quill for. It might pair up with that if I do a sweater. I have to see that it doesn't clash. But I was also thinking of maybe doing something with that chenille yarn that I bought 2 years ago at Rhinebeck, or I should say a year ago, but like 2 Rhinebecks ago, that I had such a hard time with. It kept warming out. if I hold it together with this, it probably won't worm out, but it will also change the look of it because it'll be marled. So I'm not sure. I might try and do a sweater in this and then a collar with the chenille and button band, something. But the chenille is so gorgeous that I just don't want to see it sitting in my stash forever. So those are the acquisitions. That's a lot for me. I don't buy this much yarn in maybe a year or more. Because I still have things in progress to work on. No need to buy new like this. Another acquisition was this lovely birthday gift from my dear friend Sabina. Sabina, I hope you're watching. It looks like ivory. We don't think it is. I don't know. She thinks it's plastic, but I am not sure about that. But anyway, you know, it's great with this little touch of white or ivory color. I raced through this episode because I'm on my way to teach a class, a knitting class. I'm teaching a small group of adults. And I don't know if I've mentioned, but one day a week I've been teaching young girls, age 7 to 10. So I am like completely immersed now in my knitting as if I wasn't already. But I try and carve out a little time to come back and visit with you. I hope you're enjoying my podcast because I'm sure enjoying creating this content for you. There's so much to share, and I welcome your questions. I mean, I know I don't get into every little detail, like, you know, this was 2x1 ribbing. You know, I don't go there, but if there's anything that you ever want to know, please feel free to ask me. I love, love, love reading your comments. I wish you would comment more often. You know, those comments really help boost the popularity of the channel. You've heard the term algorithm. Well, YouTube's algorithm really promotes you if there's engagement. So not just liking, not just subscribing, but commenting shows that you're like participating in this with me. So even if it's just like, that was great, or a little smiley face or whatever, those things all help. If you are a subscriber, thank you so much. Without hitting the notifications bell, you're never going to know when my episodes are coming out. So if you're about to subscribe, make sure that you drop down that menu and get the bell. If you're already subscribed, check to see if you have the bell chosen, because you probably do not. And that's a way of YouTube letting you know, like in that little bell that you see in the upper right part of your screen, that I've come out with something. That will help you to follow me more carefully. And as you can see, I got stuff coming along. So I don't want you to miss out. Mwah, everybody. I wish I could see you. I wish I could reach through the screen and give you a big hug, but thanks for being here. I will see you in another week or so. Ciao.